The planet Kathra was beautiful once. It had purple forests that stretched across entire continents. It had oceans so clear you could see the bottom from space. The Valoran people had built their civilization here over 3,000 years, creating cities of glass and light that floated above the ground on anti-gravity platforms. They were peaceful beings with translucent blue skin and large silver eyes that could see in the dark. They had no army. They had no weapons. They had forgotten what war even meant. High Counselor Yeth stood at the window of the great hall watching the sky burn. She was old by Valoran standards, nearly 400 years, and she had never seen anything like this. The Drake volume had come 3 days ago. Their ships had blocked out the sun, thousands of them, each one a living creature bred for destruction. The Drake volume were not a species in the normal sense. They were a swarm, a collective hunger that moved from world to world, consuming everything in their path. 47 planets had fallen to them. No one had ever survived, Counselor said. Tivik, her young assistant, his voice was shaking. The northern cities are gone. Etha, Vale, and Keshri all gone. The swarm is moving south. Yavith closed her eyes. She could hear the screams in her mind. Millions of her people dying in fire and darkness. The Drake volume did not negotiate. They did not take prisoners. They simply fed. How long? Until they reach Isavara, she asked. Tech checked his data tablet. His hands were trembling so badly he could barely read it. 2 days, maybe less. Efara was the last major city on Kathra. Nearly 50 million Valorans had gathered there, refugees from the destroyed regions. They were packed into every building, every shelter, every underground tunnel. Children cried for parents they would never see again. Elders sat in silence, waiting for the end. Yavith turned away from the window. Has there been any response to our distress calls? Take shook his head. Nothing, Counselor. The Galactic Council has declared our system a quarantine zone. No one is coming. She had expected this. The galactic community was old and tired. They had seen species rise and fall for millions of years. To them, the death of one more civilization was simply the natural order of things. They would not risk their own safety to help strangers, but Yeth was not ready to give up. She walked to the emergency broadcast station at the center of the Great Hall. The equipment was ancient, built long ago when the Valorans still believed in talking to the stars. No one had used it in centuries. What are you doing? Take asked. I'm going to send one more message, Yith said, on every frequency. We have open channels, closed channels, military bands, civilian bands, everything. But the Council said no one would. I do not care what the Council said. Yith's silver eyes were hard. Somewhere out there, someone might be listening, someone who is not afraid, someone who still believes that life has value. She activated the broadcast array. The machines hummed to life, old but functional. A red light blinked, indicating that the transmission was going out across the galaxy, bouncing off relay stations and passing through hyperspace corridors to destinations unknown. Yave took a deep breath and spoke. This is High Counselor Yavith of the Valorian people. Our world is under attack. The Drake volume swarm has invaded our system and is destroying our civilization. We have no military. We have no weapons. We cannot defend ourselves. Billions have already died. Within 2 days, our species will be extinct. She paused, her voice breaking slightly. I'm sending this message to anyone who can hear it. We are not asking for much. We are asking only for a chance to survive. If there is anyone out there who believes that innocent lives are worth saving, please help us. Please. She ended the transmission. Red light turned off. Silence filled the great hall. Take stared at her. Do you really think someone will come? Yith sat down slowly. She suddenly felt very old. I do not know, Tavik, but hope is the only thing we have left. The hours passed. The sky continued to burn. Reports came in from the front lines, each one worse than the last. The Drake volume were not slowing down. They were getting faster, as if they could smell victory approaching. Valoran civilians tried to flee in small ships, but they swarm shot them down before they could escape the atmosphere. There was nowhere to run. Yavith did not sleep. She sat by the broadcast station, watching the silent receiver, waiting for a response that she knew would never come. And then, 63 hours after she had sent her message, the receiver crackled to life. Valoran vessel, this is Captain Jack Morrison of the United Earth Marine Corps, commanding the USS Valor. We received your distress call. Yev jumped to her feet. Her heart was pounding. She had never heard of Earth. She had never heard of the Marine Corps. But the voice on the other end was calm, steady, and absolutely confident. We are currently en route to your system with a battle group of 5 carriers and 12 destroyers. Estimated arrival time is 6 standard hours. I need you to hold your position and keep your people safe until we get there. Tech was staring at the receiver with his mouth open. Who are they? Where did they come from? Ivith grabbed the microphone. Captain Morrison, this is Counselor Yev. Thank you for responding, but I must warn you. The Drake volume swarm is enormous. They have destroyed 47 worlds. No species has ever defeated them. Are you certain you want to? Morrison's voice cut her off. Ma'am, I appreciate the warning, but where I come from, we don't let innocent people die just because the fight is hard. We've read the reports on these Drake volume. We know what they've done. And frankly, we've been looking forward to meeting them. Though there was a pause, then Morrison spoke again, and his voice was like iron. Tell your people to hold on. Help is coming. And tell the Drake volume that Earth sends its regards. The transmission ended. Ivath stood there holding the microphone, her hands shaking. She did not know what Earth was. She did not know what Marines were, but she knew one thing for certain. For the first time in 3 days, she felt something other than despair. She felt hope. She turned to spread the word to every shelter, every refugee camp, every surviving city. Tell them help is coming. Tell them to hold on for 6 more hours. Tech nodded and ran out of the great hall. Yavith looked up at the burning sky. Somewhere out there beyond the fire and the darkness, strangers were coming to save her people. Strangers who had never met a Valoran. Strangers who had nothing to gain and everything to lose. She did not understand it, but she was grateful. 6 hours. They just had to survive for 6 more hours. The Drake volume had been conquering worlds for longer than most species had existed. They did not remember where they came from. They did not care. They only knew hunger, an endless need to consume and grow and spread across the stars. Their bodies were perfect weapons, evolved over millions of years for Killing, they had armored shells that could stop most energy weapons. They had claws that could tear through metal. They had no fear because they had never needed it. When the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace near Kathra, the Drake volume hive mind barely noticed. The ships were small and ugly, covered in angles and flat surfaces instead of the smooth curves that most advanced civilizations preferred. They looked like tools, not spacecraft. The hive mind calculated that eliminating them would take less than an hour. The Drake volume had made the first mistake of their existence. Captain Jack Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Valor. Looking at the tactical display, he was 52 years old with gray hair cut short and a face that looked like it had been carved from stone. He had fought in 3 wars before this one. He had buried more friends than he could count, but he had never seen anything like the swarm that filled his screen. Give me the numbers, he said. Lieutenant Kate Reyes worked her console with quick fingers. She was young, only 28, but she was the best tactical officer Morrison had ever worked with. Sir, I'm counting approximately 12,000 fighter-class organisms, 6 capital bioships each, one roughly 2 km long, ground forces on the planet's surface, number in the hundreds of thousands. What about our people? 3rd Marine Division is ready. In the drop bays, 3,000 troops full combat load. Sergeant Major Vance reports they're good to go. Morrison nodded slowly. The math was not good. They were outnumbered nearly 4 to 1 in space and probably 50 to 1 on the ground. Anything commander would turn around and go home, but Morrison was not here to be sane. He was here to save lives. Open a channel to the fleet, he said. Reyes pressed a button. Channel open, sir. Morrison looked at the burning planet on his screen. Somewhere down there, millions of innocent people were waiting for him, praying for him. He would not let them down. All ships. This is Valor Actual. We are weapons free. I want fighter squadrons launching in 5 minutes. Destroyers will form a defensive screen around the carriers. Our job is to punch a hole in that swarm so the Marines can get to the surface. This is not going to be easy. A lot of us might not come home, but those people down there have no one else. Today we are the only thing standing between them and extinction, so let's show these bugs what humanity is made of. Morrison out. He turned to Reyes. Get Sergeant Major Vance on comes. A moment later, a rough voice came through the speakers. Vance here, Captain Danny. You ready to drop? Born ready, sir. My boys are itching for a fight. Good, you'll be hitting the ground near the last major city. The locals call it Efivara. There's about 50 million civilians there. Your job is to keep them alive until we can break the swarm in orbit. Understood, sir. Any idea what we're dealing with on the ground? Big, ugly, and mean. They've got armor and claws, and they don't stop until they're dead. Standard ammunition should work, but aim for the joints in the head. That's where they're weakest. Vance laughed. It was not a happy sound. Sounds like my ex-wife will handle it. I know you will, Danny. Good luck. Same to you. Captain Vance out. In the drop bay of the Valor, 3,000 Marines were making their final preparations. They checked their rifles, their grenades, their combat knives. They sealed their helmets and pressurized their suits. They said quiet prayers to gods they were not sure existed. Corporal Sam Delgado stood near the front of his platoon, watching his squad get ready. He was 24 years old. Born and raised in El Paso, Texas, he had joined the Marines because his father had been a Marine and his grandfather before that. He had expected to spend his career fighting other humans over territory and resources. He had never imagined he would be dropping onto an alien world to fight monsters. "Hey, Corporal," said Private First Class Megan Torres. She was new to the squad. Only 6 months out of training, her hands were shaking as she loaded her rifle. "What do you think they look like, the aliens? I mean the ones we're saving." Delgado shrugged. "Don't know, don't care. They're people, they need help. That's all that matters." Torres nodded. But her face was pale. "I've never killed anything before, not even back on Earth." "You'll be fine," Delgado said. He put a hand on her shoulder. "Just stay close to me, follow orders, and keep shooting until they stop moving. We've trained for this, we're ready, but what if we're not? What if we all die down there?" Delgado looked at her for a long moment. Then he smiled just a little. "Then we die doing something that matters. That's more than most people can say." The ship shuddered as they entered the planet's atmosphere. Red lights began flashing in the drop bay. A voice came over the intercom. "All Marines prepare for a combat drop, T-minus 60 seconds. Sergeant Major Vance walked down the line of troops, his boots clanging on the metal floor. He was a big man, tall and broad, with a face that had been broken and rebuilt more times than anyone could remember. He had been a Marine for 30 years. He had seen everything war had to offer, but right now, looking at the young faces around him, he felt something he rarely felt anymore. "Pride, listen up," he shouted. "In 60 seconds, those doors are going to open, and we're going to jump into hell. Down there's a bunch of aliens who have never seen a human before. They're scared, they're dying, and they're counting on us to save them." He stopped in the middle of the bay and looked around at his Marines. "I'm not going to lie to you, a lot of us won't make it home. That's the price of the job, but I want you to remember something. We're not here because someone ordered us to be. We're here because this is what Marines do. We protect the weak, we fight the strong, and we never ever give up." The countdown reached 0. The drop doors opened. Below them a world burned. "Marines!" Vance roared. "Let's go to work," and 3,000 human soldiers jumped into the fire. The drop pods hit the ground like metal fists punching into the earth. They came down in waves, hundreds of them crashing into the fields outside Ethavara with enough force to shake buildings, kill them away. Smoke and dust rose from the impact craters, forming a thick gray cloud that blocked out the light of the burning sky. The Valorans watched from their shelters, their silver eyes wide with fear and confusion. They did not know what was happening. For 3 days they had seen nothing but death falling from above. Now something else was falling. Something that hit the ground and did not explode. Inside one of those pods, Corporal Sam Delgado released his harness and grabbed his rifle. The pod's door blew outward with a loud bang, and he was moving before the smoke cleared. Training took over. His body knew what to do even when his mind was still. "Catching up, squad, on me," he shouted. "Form up in advance." Around him other pods were opening. Marines poured out into the gray haze, their boots crunching on alien soil. They moved in practice formation, rifles raised, eyes scanning for targets. They did not have to wait long. The Drake volume came out of the darkness like nightmares given. Flesh, they were tall nearly 3 m with bodies covered in black chitinous armor. They had 4 arms, each one ending curved claws that could cut through steel. Their heads were flat and triangular with no eyes that humans could see, just rows of teeth that dripped with something that might have been saliva or might have been acid. The first wave hit the marine lines. Like a tsunami, there was no warning, no battle cry. The Drake volume simply charged, thousands of them pouring out of the burning forest with the single-minded hunger of predators who had never known defeat. Contact front. Someone screamed. Open fire. The Marines opened fire. The sound was deafening. 3,000 rifles firing at once, their muzzle flashes lighting up the smoke like lightning in a storm. Bullets tore into the charging Drake volume, punching holes in their armor, shattering their limbs, dropping them by the dozens, but more kept coming, always more. Private Torres fired her rifle until it was empty, then slammed in a fresh magazine and kept firing. Her hands had stopped shaking. There was no room for fear now, only action. A Drake volume warrior lunged at her from the left and she spun, putting 3 rounds into its head. It collapsed at her feet. Still twitching, keep moving, Delgado shouted, don't let them surround us. The Marines pushed forward through the chaos, stepping over bodies, both alien and human. They were taking casualties. Delgado saw a man from 2nd Squad go down, his chest torn open by Drake volume claws. He saw another Marine get grabbed by 2 of the creatures and pulled apart before anyone could save him, but the line held. The Marines kept advancing. Sergeant Major Vance was at the center of the formation, his rifle barking in controlled bursts. He had been in more battles than he could count, but he had never fought anything like this. The Drake volume were fast, strong, and completely without mercy. They did not retreat, they did not surrender, they just kept attacking until they were dead. A massive Drake volume, bigger than the others, charged directly. Advance. He emptied his magazine into its chest, but it kept coming. He dropped his rifle and drew his combat knife, meeting the creature head-on. Its claws ran across his armor, cutting through the plating and drawing blood. He drove his knife into the gap between its head and body, twisting hard. The creature screamed, a sound like metal scraping against glass, and collapsed. Vance yanked his knife free and looked around. They were winning. Slowly, the Marine firepower was too much for the Drake volume ground forces, but they were paying for every meter. Blood, push forward, he roared. Get to the city, protect those civilians inside. Ethevara, the Valorans huddled in their shelters and listened to the sounds of battle. They could hear the gunfire, a constant roar that never seemed to stop. They could hear the screams, both human and Drake volume. They could feel the ground shaking from explosions. A young Valoran female named Sithra pressed her face against a window, trying to see through the smoke. She was only 50 years old, barely an adult by her people's standard. She had never seen violence before the Drake volume came. Now she could not look away. Through the haze, she saw shapes moving. At first she thought they were Drake volume, and her heart nearly stopped, but then the smoke cleared slightly and she saw them clearly for the first time. They were small compared to the Valorans, these strange beings. Their skin was various shades of brown and pink, hidden beneath dark armor that covered their entire bodice. They moved in groups, communicating with sharp sounds and hand signals, and they were fighting, not running, not hiding, but actually fighting the Drake volume. Sierra watched a human soldier get knocked down by Drake volume warrior. The creature raised its claws to deliver the killing blow, but before it could strike, another human appeared from nowhere, slamming into the Drake volume and knocking it aside. The two humans got up and kept fighting back to back, protecting each other. They came. Sithra whispered, they actually came. The battle raged for hours. The Marines established a perimeter around the city, digging in and holding the line against wave after wave of Drake volume attacks. Ammunition ran low. Soldiers fought with knives and fists when their guns went empty. Medics worked frantically to save the wounded, performing surgery in the middle of firefights. Corporal Delgado found himself separated from his squad, pinned down behind a collapsed wall with Torres and two other Marines. Drake volume warriors circled their position, probing for weaknesses. How much ammo you got? Delgado asked. Torres checked her pouches. 2 magazines. Maybe 60 rounds. Same here. Delgado looked at the circling enemies. There had to be at least 20 of them. The math was not good. So what do we do? Torres asked. Her voice was calm now. She had stopped being afraid. Somewhere around the 100th kill, Delgado smiled grimly. We make those 60 rounds count, and when we run out, we use our knives, and when our knives break, we use our hands, and then we die, but we take as many of them with us as we can. Torres nodded. She raised her rifle and took aim at the nearest Drake volume. For Earth, she said quietly. For Earth, Delgado agreed. They opened fire, but death did not come for them that day. Just as the Drake volume were closing in, a roar of engines filled the air. Human gunships screamed overhead, their weapons tearing into the enemy forces. Reinforcements arrived, fresh Marines pouring into the gap and pushing the Drake volume back. By nightfall, the perimeter was secure. The Marines had done the impossible. They had stopped the unstoppable, but the battle was not over. Above them, in the darkness of space, the real war was just beginning. The space above Cathra was a graveyard of fire and metal. Human fighters twisted and dove through clouds of Drake volume organisms, their guns blazing trails of light across the void. Destroyers traded blows with bioships 10 times their size, their hulls burning, but their weapons never stopping. The USS Valor sat at the center of the formation, coordinating the battle like a conductor leading an orchestra of destruction. Captain Morrison had not slept in 30 hours. He stood on the bridge, watching the tactical display, giving orders in a voice that never wavered. Around him, his crew worked with desperate efficiency. They knew the stakes. They knew what failure would mean. Valor. This is Destroyer Hammerfall. We've lost our port weapons array, taking heavy damage. Hammerfall, fall back to secondary position. Destroyer Ironclad, move up to cover their withdrawal. Copy. Valor, Ironclad moving on the display. Morrison watched another human ship disappear. That was the 5th destroyer. They had lost nearly 800 people. Gone in an instant. He forced himself to keep watching. He owed them that much, sir. Lieutenant Raya said. The biohips are focusing their attack on our left flank. If they break through there, they'll have a clear path to the planet. Morrison studied the formation. The Drake volume were smart. He had to give They had identified the weak point in his defense and were hammering it with everything they had. If something did not change soon, they would break through. Get Commander Navarro on comes, Morrison said. A moment later, a tired voice came through the speakers. Navarro here, Captain Chris. I need Reaper Squadron to hit those bio ships on the left flank, take out their reproductive cores. That should slow them down. There was a pause. Both men knew what Morrison was asking. The biohips were surrounded by thousands of fighter-class organisms. Flying into that swarm was almost certain death. Understood, sir, Navarro said finally. Reaper Squadron will get it done, Chris. Morrison hesitated. Good luck. Thank you, sir. Navarro out. Lieutenant Commander Chris Navarro was 35 years old. He had a wife back on Earth, a woman named Lisa who taught elementary school and hated that he was in the military. He had 2 daughters, ages 7 and 4, who drew him pictures of spaceships and asked him when he was coming home. He looked at their photos one last time before sealing his helmet. Reaper Squadron. This is Reaper. Later, we are cleared for attack. Run on the enemy biohips. Stay tight. Watch your wingmates and make every shot count. Our people on the ground are counting on us. 12 fighters formed up around him. They were all that remained of what had once been 24. Every pilot knew the odds. None of them hesitated. Reaper Squadron attack. Fighters dove into the swarm. Drake volume organisms came at them from every direction. Their organic weapons spitting acid and razor-sharp projectiles. Navarro jinked and rolled, his hands moving on the controls faster than thought. On his left, Reaper 4 took a direct hit and exploded. On his right, Reaper 7 was swarmed by a dozen creatures and torn apart. Stay on target, Navarro shouted. Almost there. The bioship loomed ahead of them, a massive living creature that looked like a twisted nightmare of flesh and bone. Its hull pulsed with sickly light. Tentacles reached out to grab the attacking fighters. Reaper 2 went down. Then Reaper 9, then Reaper 11. Navarro kept flying. The reproductive core was just ahead, a glowing organ deep inside the creature's body. If he could hit that, the biohip would die. All its offspring would die with it. A tentacle slammed into his fighter, sending him spinning. Alarm screamed in his ears. He wrestled with the controls, fighting to stabilize. Come on, he growled. Come on. The fighter steadied. The core was directly ahead. He had one chance. Navarro thought of Lisa. He thought of his daughters. He thought of the 50 million people on the planet below who would die if he failed. This is for them, he whispered. He fired. His missiles struck the reproductive core dead center. The biohip screamed, a sound that somehow carried through the vacuum of space. It began to tear itself apart, its body rupturing and spilling burning fluid into the void. Organisms around it went mad, attacking each other in confusion. Navarro tried to pull away, but his fighter was too damaged. A piece of the dying bio ship caught him, spinning him toward the planet's atmosphere. Reaper leader is hit, he said calmly. I'm going down. Tell my family I love them. His fighter burned up on entry. Chris Navarro died with his eyes open, watching the planet he had helped save grow larger in his view screen. But his sacrifice was not in vain. With the largest bioship destroyed, the Drakeville formation began to collapse. The human fleet pressed the advantage, destroying 2 More bioships in quick succession. 4. The first time in the battle, the swarm began to retreat on the ground. Marines saw the sky light up as Drake volume organisms fell, burning from orbit. A cheer went up along the lines. Ragged and exhausted but real. There. Breaking, someone shouted. The bugs are breaking. Sergeant Major Vance stood atop a pile of enemy dead, his armor cracked and covered in blood, both red and black. He had lost his rifle. Hours ago, he was holding a Drake volume claw that he had ripped from a dead enemy and used as a weapon. His helmet was gone, revealing a face that was more wound than skin. He looked up at the burning sky and smiled. That's right, he said quietly. Run. Tell your friends what happened here. Tell them what humans do to those who hurt innocent people. The battle was not over yet. There were still thousands of Dr. Volume on the ground, and they fought with the desperation of creatures who knew they were losing, but the tide had turned. The Marines pushed forward, driving the enemy back kilometer by kilometer, until finally the last direct volume stronghold fell. When dawn came to Kthra, it revealed a landscape of devastation. The purple forests were ash, the crystal cities were rubble. Bodies covered the ground in every direction, human and Dree Volume and Valoran alike, but Ethavara still stood. 50 million Valorans were still alive. High Counselor Yevth emerged from her bunker into the pale morning light. She walked through streets littered with debris and corpses until she found what she was looking for. A group of human soldiers were sitting against a collapsed building, too tired to move. Their armor was destroyed, their weapons were empty, several of them were wounded badly enough that they should have been unconscious. Vance saw her approaching and forced himself to stand. It took 3 tries. Ma'am, he said, his voice rough. Sergeant Major Danny Vance, 3rd Marine Division. Are your people okay? Yeth looked at this battered creature, this fragile being who had crossed the stars to fight monsters for strangers. Tears ran down her blue face. Why, she asked, why did you come? Why did you sacrifice so much for people you had never met? Vance swayed slightly. He was barely staying conscious, but he met her silver eyes with his own. Bloodshot once, and gave her the only answer that mattered, because you asked. Then he collapsed. His Marines caught him before he hit the ground. The battle of Kthra was over. The Drake Volume had retreated for the first time in their history, and the galaxy had learned a new word: doth human. The weeks after the battle passed. Slowly the fires died down, the smoke cleared. The Valorans began the long process of burying their dead and rebuilding their world. It would take generations to undo the damage the Drake Volume had caused, but they were alive. Against all odds, they were alive. Human fleet remained in orbit, helping where they could. Engineers worked alongside Valoran technicians to repair critical infrastructure. Medics treated the wounded of both species. Soldiers shared their rations with hungry civilians. It was strange, this cooperation between two peoples who had not known each other existed just weeks before, but somehow it worked. Captain Morrison visited the surface only once. He walked through the ruins of what had once been a beautiful city, looking at the destruction his people had helped create in the process of saving it. 847 Marines had died in the battle. Nearly 2,000 more were wounded. 3 destroyers and their entire crews were gone forever, and Commander Navarro, the best pilot Morrison had ever known, had burned up in the atmosphere, saving strangers he would never meet. Was it worth it? Morrison did not know how to answer that question. All he knew was that when the Valorans had called for help, he had answered. That was what humans did. Sergeant Major Vance spent 2 weeks in a Valoran medical facility, his body slowly knitting itself back together. The Valoran doctors were amazed he was alive at all. His wounds should have killed him 3 times over, but Vance just smiled and said that Marines were too stubborn to die. When he was finally able to walk again, he found Corporal Delgado and Private Torres waiting for him outside the hospital. Sergeant Major Delgado said, saluting, "Good to see you on your feet." Vance returned the salute. "Good to be on them. How are they?" "Troops, tired, sad, proud." Delgado shrugged. "We lost a lot of good people, but we saved a lot more. I think everyone is okay with that trade." Vance nodded slowly. He looked at Torres, who was standing quietly to the side. Young woman who had been shaking with fear before the drop was gone. In her place was a hardened soldier who had seen things that would haunt her for the rest of her life. "How you doing, Torres?" Vance asked. Torres thought for a moment. "I keep dreaming about them." Drake volume. "Sometimes I wake up and I can still smell the blood." She paused. "But then I walk outside and I see the Valoran kids playing in the streets. Kids who would be dead if we hadn't come, and I think maybe the nightmares are worth it." Vance put a hand on her shoulder. "That's the burden we carry. Private, we see the darkness so others don't have to. It's not fair. It's not easy. But it matters." Torres nodded. "Yes, Sergeant Major, it matters." High Counselor Yith announced that the Valoran people would build a memorial to honor the humans who had died for them. It would stand in the heart of Ithavara, on the spot where the first Marine drop pods had landed. The Valorans spent months working on it, pouring their grief and gratitude into every detail. The memorial was unveiled on the 1-year anniversary of the battle. It was a tower of crystal and stone, 50 m tall, reaching toward the sky like a hand stretching for the stars. Carved into its surface were the names of every human who had died defending Cathra. 847 names, each one etched in letters that would last for thousands of years. At the base of the tower, in the largest letters of all, was a single phrase in both Valoran and English. It said simply, "No one fights alone, Captain." Morrison attended the ceremony. So did Vance, Delgado, Torres, and hundreds of other survivors from the battle. They stood in their dress uniforms, their medals shining in the sunlight, watching as Counselor Yavith addressed the crowd. "1 year ago," she said, "our world was dying. We had no hope. We had no future. And then from across the galaxy, strangers came to save us. They did not know us. They owed us nothing. But they came anyway. They fought for us. They died for us." She looked at the human soldier standing before her. "I have spent my entire life studying the cultures of the galaxy. I thought I understood what made civilizations rise and fall. But I did not understand humanity. You are not the strongest species. You are not the oldest or the wisest. Your lives are short. Your bodies are fragile. And your technology is primitive by galactic standards." Morrison shifted uncomfortably. He was not sure where this was going. "But you have something that no other species possesses." Yet continued, "You have a fire inside you, a refusal to accept injustice, a willingness to sacrifice. Everything for people you have never met. The galaxy thought it knew what war looked like. It was wrong. It had never seen humanity fight for those it loves. She turned to face the memorial tower. The Drake volume conquered 47 worlds. They were considered invincible, and then they met Earth, they met Marines. And they learned that there are worse things in the universe than monsters. Ripple of sound went through the crowd. Valorans and humans alike were moved by her words. Today we honor the fallen, but we also send a message to the galaxy. The message is this: you are not alone, no matter how dark the night becomes, no matter how hopeless your situation seems. There is a species out there that will answer your call. They are called humans, and they are the most terrifying, wonderful, impossible creatures in existence. The ceremony ended with a moment of silence. Then the human soldiers began to sing. It was an old song, one that Marines had sung for centuries. The Valorans did not understand the words, but they understood the feeling. It was a song of loss and pride, of grief and hope. It was a song that said, we remember, we will always remember. Word of the Battle of Kathra spread across the galaxy. The story was told in 1,000 languages on 1,000 worlds. The Drake volume had been stopped. A species called humanity had emerged from the smoke, bleeding and broken and absolutely unstoppable. The great empires took notice. The predator races reconsidered their plans. And everywhere among the weak and the oppressed, a new phrase began to circulate: when all else fails, call for Earth. The Marines will come. 5 years after the battle, a distress call came from the Terran system. A species called the KTH were being attacked by slavers. They had no military, no weapons, no way to defend themselves. They sent their message into the void, hoping someone would hear. The response came within hours. Torian system, this is Captain Sam Delgado of the United Earth Marine Corps, commanding the USS Navarro. We received your distress call. Hold your position. Help is on the way. Sergeant Major Torres stood beside him on the bridge, watching the stars streak past. As they entered hyperspace, she was not the scared young private she had been 5 years ago. She was a leader now, hardened by battle, forged by sacrifice. Another fight, she said, another group of strangers who need saving. Delgado nodded. He thought of Vance, who had retired last year to teach at the Marine Academy. He thought of Morrison, now an admiral still commanding fleets from the Bridge of the Valor. He thought of Navarro, whose name was painted on the hull of the ship beneath his feet. That's what we do, Delgado said. We answer the call. We run toward the fire. We die for people we've never met. Torres smiled grimly. Sounds crazy when you say it like that. It is crazy, but it's also the best thing about us. Delgado looked at the stars. We're not the strongest species in the galaxy. We're not the smartest or the oldest. But we're the ones who show up every time, no matter the odds. That's what makes us human. The USS Navarro dropped out of hyperspace above a burning world. Below them, innocent people waited for salvation, and once again from the smoke and fire, Earth's Marines appeared.